Pakistan. She's the former chairperson for Center for Investigative Journalism and is now an editor of Nariswar magazine and the chief board advisor of Human Rights Journalists Association, Hurja. She's also a weekly columnist at Rising Nepal and a regular contributor to Nepali Times. A warm welcome to you all yet again, and we thank you for being here with us. I would also like to mention that the speakers may speak in English or Nepali as per their convenience. Now, the main objectives of this webinar is to understand the status and prospect of the transit transport agreement signed between Nepal and China in 2016. This webinar aims to first discuss the feasibility of Nepal's transit and transport agreement with China, to understand how Nepal can reduce its transit and transportation dependency on India via connectivity with China, and to discuss how better transit connectivity with China would facilitate international trade for Nepal. If the audience would like to ask any questions, I would request you to send them in the chat and we will get to them at the end of today's program. Now, to proceed with the discussion, I would like to invite my colleague Shraddha Ghimire to present the key findings of her research on the topic. She is currently working as a research fellow here at CECIT, and she works under the thematic area of economy and development. She has completed a bachelor's in economics with honors from Delhi University and holds an ISS Master's Certificate in International Development Studies from University of Oslo, Norway. Shraddha, the floor is yours.
Anji, for the warm welcome and good morning to everyone. Firstly, I would like to apologize for the inconvenience caused at the beginning of our webinar, and now we are back to the webinar, so a heartfelt welcome to everyone. As Shubhangi introduced, CECIT initiated a study on Nepal-China Transit Transport Agreement, which was signed in 2016. But even after 5 years of signing the agreement, we have seen that the agreement has not been functionalized. There has not even been a single cargo or a shipment of goods via the Chinese routes that was promised under the agreement. It is under this context that CECIT undertook a research study to analyze the objectives and implications of the agreement for Nepal's transit and transportation connectivity with China, as well as access, how we can further increase Nepal's connectivity with the rest of the world. I'm going to share the screen and show you the key research findings for the research that CECIT initiated in just a moment.
Kindly hold on for a minute. We're trying to share the screen here.
Thank you so much for bearing with us. Now we are back to our presentation. The study that CECIT initiated was titled Nepal-China Transit Transport Agreement and Analysis, which commenced from the month of May in 2021. As a short introduction, I would like to mention here that Nepal is dependent on trade, transit, and transportation facilities via Indian ports to conduct its third country trade. Because India is the top import and export partner for Nepal, registering an export share of around $629 million and an import share of $7.11 billion in 2019. This statistics was figured out from the statistics provided by Customs Department here in Nepal. But we also know that India has been imposing a series of economic blockades on Nepal's southern borders, which has denied Nepal access to Calcutta, Haldia, and Visakhapatnam ports. The most recent economic embargo was experienced post the 2016 earthquake, which resulted in Nepal reducing its exports by 25.4% and its imports reducing by 31.9%. Due to this reason, the government of Nepal was searching for an alternative to its transit and transportation dependency on India, which led to the signing of the Transit and Transportation Agreement with China in 2016. And after 3 rounds of consultative interviews and negotiations, it signed the text to the protocol in 2018. According to the protocol, Nepal was allowed to use 4 seaports and 3 land ports and 6 border points. But even after 5 years of signing the agreement, the Transit Transportation Agreement has not been functionalized. Moreover, the COVID-19 pandemic has left Raswa and Tatapani border points operationally shut since January 2020, only allowing import of extremely essential goods like medicines and other equipment. It is under this scenario that CECIF undertook the study to understand key objectives, which included in identifying the progress made by the Transit Transport Agreement. The second objective was to ascertain why Nepal was facing a border closure since January 2020. The third objective was to review the response from both the governments with respect to resolving the soft embargo. And the last objective was to review the significance of Trans-Himalaya multi-dimensional connectivity network for Nepal's transit and transportation connectivity with China. Now we go on to the findings side of the presentation. Our research has figured out that the primary objective in signing the Transit Transport Agreement was to secure additional routes as opposed to the Chinese routes being alternative routes to Nepal's dependency on India. This point here clearly clarifies that although in the media and other reports, we had known that the Chinese routes were alternative routes, but they were not alternative routes. They were additional routes to reduce Nepal's dependency on India. The agreement was envisioned to bring in East Asian and South Asian goods within 15 days as compared to Indian routes, which would take 40 to 45 days. Similarly, goods from other Western markets like USA and Europe were also anticipated to come via the Pacific route. A consultative interviews with officials at Ministry of Commerce Nepal has also revealed that the major focus of the agreement was to bring in goods from Gwadar port in Pakistan, which would reduce Nepal's shipping costs from Pakistan by 400%. In our second slide of findings, we have analyzed if the agreement was able to reduce Nepal's transit dependency on Indian routes and what limitations are holding its effectiveness. The first finding that we have figured out is that even with the agreement in place, out of Nepal's total trade volume with China, only 1 to 2% of the trade is taking place via Tatapani and Raswa border points, whereas the remaining trade is happening via Indian routes, which includes Calcutta, Haldia, and Visakhapatnam. The biggest drawback of the agreement lies in its modalities and procedures, followed by the lack of a standard operating procedure, which has been impeding the implementation of the agreement. A consultative interview with a joint secretary at Ministry of Commerce in Nepal has revealed to us that the agreement had stipulated for the formation of a directive committee and a technical committee who were assigned to further the modalities and procedures. But no such committee has formed till date, even after 5 years of signing the agreement. Similarly, the same source which we had spoken to at Ministry of Commerce has also revealed that no national budget has allocated monetary support to develop cross-border infrastructure like warehouses, dry ports, and other needed infrastructures at Tatapani and Raswa border points. The same source has also clarified that Nepal's Commerce Ministry is largely absent from bilateral meetings, weakening any negotiation with the Chinese counterpart. Here, I would like to clarify that China's bureaucracy is vastly different from Nepal's bureaucracy. In China, the secretary and the minister is the same person. That is, the minister has both the administrative and political powers. But in Nepal's context, the secretary does not have political powers. Hence, when he is in the meeting, it weakens any negotiation. In the other point, we have figured out that Chinese points are 5 times farther than Indian ports, such as Vizag and Birganj, The distance between Vizag and Birgunj is around 15,000 kilometers, and from Calcutta to Birgunj is 706 kilometers. This clearly shows that the Chinese points are not physically accessible for Nepal's trade. Other existing hindrances along Chinese border points lies in the special citizenship card, which has led to a transportation syndicate. Here, I would like to mention that we talked with a few importers who are importing via Tatapani border point, which has revealed to us that the border inhabitants and truck drivers are charging around 4 lakhs to 5 lakhs as compared to the normal transportation cost, which is supposed to be around 20,000 to 30,000. So this transportation syndicate is increasing costs for Nepali traders and making it very difficult for them to trade via Tatapani border point. Similarly, another big reveal that we figured out in the research was through a consultative meeting with a former joint secretary at Ministry of Commerce, who has revealed to us that goods can only come to Nepal via Lansau, Sigatse, and Tatapani or Raswa route. There has been no development on the other promised route. Moreover, this route is a military route, in the sense that only when the Chinese military operations are completed for the day can Nepali goods come from this route. So this is a major impediment for the agreement ending in internalized. Rigidity has also been a big obstacle among Nepali traders who are risk averse. Since they do not have the document for the standard operating procedure, they are very hesitant in using the Chinese route. Similarly, other hindrances include administrative hassles, time constraints, and non-tariff barriers in cargo operations across China. And the biggest reveal that we figured out in our research was that although the agreement was signed with the major intention of increasing Nepal's international trade with China as well as other third countries, it was just a tool to feed into Oli's larger political interests. That is, it was a political gimmick constructed by the then Oli government of 2016 to meet the promises it had made before winning the general election. In 2016, Oli had risen on nationalistic sentiment, and he had assured to the general public, as well as the former administration, that he would find an alternative to Nepal's dependency on Indian routes. To meet these promises, he had led the bureaucracy and his internal team to conceptualize an agreement with China and to sign it. As soon as the agreement was signed, so was the government's intention in pursuing the agreement, and it was ultimately scrapped off the national priority. This was revealed to us by one of the former secretary at Ministry of Commerce who wished not to be named. In our other slide, we have figured out what was the reason for the border blockade on Nepal and China border points since January 2020, and how it had impacted the import of goods for Nepali traders. We have figured out that the spread of COVID-19 and the lack of proper COVID-19 regulations and protocols on Nepal's side had exerted a soft economic embargo on Tatapani and Raswa border points. Considering this, the custom offices at Tatapani and Raswa are currently following the hook and drop method, where no human interface takes place. In this method, goods from China are allowed to come to Nepal, but goods from Nepal are not allowed to enter into China. Of a consultative interview with custom officials at Tatapani and Raswa also revealed to us that Chinese authorities and Chinese administration are planning to make a strategic shift to from Tatapani to Corolla in Mustang. This was further justified by our literature review, which revealed to us that an international gateway, an immigration office, and custom offices on Lizi, which is the Chinese side on the Corolla border point, has been built to commence transit services via Corolla. The major reason why Chinese are planning to make a strategic shift from Tatapani to Corolla has been revealed as Chinese sensitivity regarding the whole region due to anti-Tibetan sentiment in Tatapani. In the next slide, we have calculated the approximate volume of loss on national, individual, and local level due to the soft embargo. All these data have been figured out from the Customs Department's data, which we collected for the period or the fiscal year 2020-21 and 2019-2020. According to the data given to us by the Department of Customs, we have concluded that at Tatapani and Raswa border points, imports have reduced by 11.23 million at Tatopani and 2.9 million at Rasua. Similarly, exports at both these regions have reached zero during this period. That is, Nepal has not been able to export even a single good to China during the 1.5 years. In terms of revenue collection at both Tatopani and Rasua has reduced by a huge margin, with both the custom points being barely able to collect 17% of the targeted revenue. In terms of traders have diverted 70% of their goods import to Indian routes and are currently paying 1.2 million more per container and are waiting for 30 to 45 extra days. Comparing this to Tatopani and Rasua border points, they would have been waiting for only 10 days, but because the goods have been rerouted to Indian routes, they are now waiting for 30 to 45 extra days. We then talked with two importers who were importing shoes and clothes via Tatopani and Rasua points. The shoe importer is currently paying $6,000 to 7,000 more, and the fabric importer cost has tripled to $7,500. Similarly, on a local level, which is on level of border inhabitants, it has been revealed to us that the districts at the northern border points are facing food insecurity. For instance, one bag of rice is currently costing 8,000 to 7,000 from the previous 2,000 to 3,000. Similarly, market for Nepali herbs, carpets, handicrafts, dyes, salt, and oil has closed, with households losing income worth 30 million on an annual basis. And yak and hill cow trading has also stopped, with households losing income worth 10 million on an annual basis. As we move ahead in the next slide, we have figured out what is the reason for both the governments to be unresponsive on the recent economic embargo. The unresponsiveness from Nepal government clearly shows that Nepal is clearly dependent on India for all its imports and all its exports. As India is the top import and export partner for Nepal, Nepal clearly cannot afford to lose its trading relations with India. But since Nepal's trade with China is not as significant as with India, it has not taken much action on this issue. Moreover, option of alternative routes like easy access to markets such as Visakhapatnam, Kolkata, and Haldia ports in India is also impeding Nepali officials in taking prompt action in resolving the issues of economic embargo. On the Chinese government side, China does not regard Nepal as a significant trading partner. China barely imports goods worth Nepali 720,000 from Nepal, and this shows that Nepal is not a relevant trading partner for China. Moreover, a consultative interview with Joint Secretariat Ministry of Commerce has also revealed that there is huge weaknesses in part of Nepal's diplomacy and bureaucracy in managing border issues. China has the highest number of Nepalese missions. At present day, China has 5 Nepalese missions, which includes 1 embassy and 4 consulate offices. Yet no diplomats or consulate generals have taken actions to resolve the soft embargo, which has been imposed in January 2020. In our last slide, we talked about and seek to find answers as to what were the long-term implications of Trans-Himalayan Multidimensional Connectivity Network for Nepal. We all know that the connectivity network starting from Chengdu is to link Tibet by Sichuan-Tibet Highway and Railway, further connecting China with Indian Railway Network. The Trans-Himalayan Multidimensional Connectivity Network primarily aims to connect China with South Asian markets, including India and Bangladesh. A consultative interview with officials at the Ministry of Commerce and Industry has revealed to us that China has specifically asked for access to South Asian markets under the connectivity network as a condition to build infrastructures and railways across Nepal. Due to this, the government of Nepal is in a dilemma as to whether Nepal or China would get transit rights and facilities under the connectivity network. Moreover, investment modality for the infrastructure development between the two countries is yet to be negotiated. Similarly, a talk with researchers at South Asian Watch and Trade and Economics revealed to us that Nepal lacks systematic storehousing and supply chain management, which is raising concerns as to whether Nepal could handle the movement of Chinese-bound cargoes and trucks across Nepal without invading its own domestic movement of trucks and cargo. With this, I end the presentation on our research And I hand over the webinar to our colleague Shivangi.
Thank you, Shraddha, for that information-rich presentation. I would now like to request our first speaker, Mr. Purushottam Ojaji, to provide commentary on this topic, please.
Thank you, Shubhangi. Of course, the presentation from Shraddha, it was quite comprehensive and it covers a lot of many aspects with regard to transit transport connectivity. The moot questions, that is whether Nepal will be able to reduce its transit dependency with China by utilizing Chinese routes. I think it is not very much probable as we see the situations and as we go through as we consider the points presented by Shraddha. What I see that right at the moment, while talking about the transit through China, first of all, three factors are quite important in this. One is the first factor that we have to consider is about the distance between the seaport in China and Nepal borders, which of course Shraddha has rightly pointed out that even the nearest port in China, that is Tianjin, that is also around 3,300 kilometers away from Nepal border. I think that is already more than 5 times higher there in terms of the distance in comparison to the distance between the Indian port and the Chinese port. And second factor, what I see that the although the transit transport agreement has been concluded in 2016 and its protocol was finalized, was signed in 2019, nobody knows what will be the procedures involved in movement of the transited goods and the time and cost that is involved while transiting goods through the territory of China. That is, it is still untested. Even a single consignment has not been moved through the territory of China in terms of the transit traffic. So I think it is very important. And if you see the provisions laid in the transit transport agreement and the protocol, in my opinion, it is incomplete. Still, it is incomplete. And when we talk about movement of the goods through the transit movement of goods, we have to lay down the customs procedure, the insurance provision, and the liability for the transporters, and methods of receiving and handing over of the goods. And these are several procedural things required for that. So if you see the protocol to the transit transport agreement, it doesn't mention all these things, and everything is left on the discretion of the Chinese customs officials. So I think so it is very much uncertain. Even the Nepalese side doesn't know what cost it will involve and what time does it take, and what procedure has to be followed. I think that is the second thing that we have to consider. And third is the lack of transport infrastructure, particularly on the Nepalese side. We don't have it's already been pointed out by Shraddha that only the 2 out of the 6 border posts that we are having, official border post in our trade with Tibet, China, only 2 are operational, and they are approached by motorable service, but still they are not functional, particularly after the earthquake of 2015. So I think the infrastructure, particularly on the Nepalese side, is very much important that we have to look at. And what I see that in this context, the transit transport agreement that has been concluded by Nepal back in 2016 in the wake of the embargo or the blockade imposed by the government of India, the transit transport agreement may work as a safety valve. Whenever there is blockade from the southern side of the border, then in that case, although the cost, we don't know the cost and the time, whatever is required for movement through the Chinese territory, but still we can use that route for third country trade. So I think it can be viewed as a right at the moment as the safety valve only for the transit traffic. And what we see that particularly when you go for, you see, the movement of the cargo, the procedures has to be quite laid down, as I have already told, because different type of cargo needs different type of procedure. Say, for example, if it is containerized cargo, the procedure may be different, maybe for the break bulk, for liquid cargo, for hazardous cargo, and for the break bulk and the bulk cargo. I think the modalities and the procedure for movement of this cargo quite differ from each other, because there is questions of liability, insurance, and all these things. I think that has to be worked out. And what I see that the Tatopani has been closed from the, particularly from the Chinese side, because they are their intention is not to further operate Tatopani due to this sensitivity. I don't know what is this Tibetan sensitivity, and other sensitivity would be due to this unstable soil conditions on that area. Particularly every year we see a lot of floodings and landslides that is damaging the roads and bridges over there. So I think that even in that context, it is a little bit vulnerable. But we have other opportunities that we can utilize. Say, for example, full utilization of the Rasua Gaudi Kerung, that is possible. But we have to develop. We have to develop our road facilities in the Nepalese territory, in the Nepalese side. That is very much important. And another, maybe in the eastern side, the in Sangkhua Sabha, what it is called, this Polangchungola is in there. Sangkhua Sabha is what it is called, I don't know.
Kimathanga.
Kimathanga, yes, sorry. Kimathanga Rio in the eastern region, and in the western region, I think Mustang Korala Pass, and in the Midwest or in Karnali region, it is the Yaripurang. These are quite important border posts but it needs to be connected with the road facilities. Whatever the road is being constructed in Nepalese side, it is moving in a very slow pace. And we are talking about this multi-dimensional trans-Himalayan multi-dimensional connectivity, which has been conceptualized and which has been agreed. Some sort of arrangement has been made, some sort of agreement, understanding. I don't say agreement, rather than understanding has been reached during the visit of Chinese president in Nepal back in 2019. So I think the first we have to focus on developing this multimodal multidimensional connectivity, trans-Himalayan multidimensional connectivity. That is very much important. When we are talking about road connectivity and even the rail connectivity has been talked about, but very little progress has been made on that direction. I think that is very much important in order to increase the linkages, connectivity between Nepal and China. And of course, if you have this type of connectivity between the two countries, of course, it will help to utilize the transit services as well. So that is very much important. So in short, just I would like to point out, I would like to mention 4 key points in order to improve the, you see, transit transport relationship with China. The first thing is that we have to focus on improving physical connectivity and the transport connectivity. That means we have to develop the north-south corridor, transport corridors. I don't see any possibilities in near future to have the railway connectivity, but at least we can start with the road connectivity, constructing very good road network connecting the northern border with the southern border. That is one of the area that we have to look at. And of course, we should be able to utilize the Chinese resources in order to under this what we call the trans-Himalayan multidimensional connectivity concept. Mm, particularly connecting all these six border posts that is that are the official border posts between Nepal and Tibet Autonomous Region of China. That is very much important. So it will ultimately help Nepal to be a transit country between India and China as well, because we have been talking about this transit services between the two big neighbors since 15-16 years back, but it has very little work has been done on that direction. And my second point is about, of course, developing procedures for movement of transit traffic through the ports in China. That is very much important, and even the government government of Nepal, in my opinion, they have done very little work. I have been suggesting the government authorities that at least they should try to have the trial run of the goods, containerized goods or and the non-containerized goods from the seaports in China. Of course, 3 seaport and four seaports has been designated for Nepalese transit traffic. At least we have to have the run of transport vehicles and the transported goods from these seaports to the Nepal border. So it is very much important to see how it will be moved, what will be the procedure involved, what time it will take, and what will be the cost involved, so that we can compare it with the transit movement through India, and we can ascertain whether it is feasible in long term or not. So, and even we will be able to identify what are the bottlenecks in movement of the transited goods. I think that is very much important to look at, and the government has to go for trial run of the goods, transited goods through the territory of China. That is very much important. So third point, just I want to highlight, it is about the implementation of the past agreement concluded between government of Nepal and the government of People's Republic of China. I can quote you several examples. Say, for example, government of Nepal and government of China has concluded a transport agreement, not the transport agreement back in 1994, but it has never been realized. If you really implemented that agreement, it will be possible to move the trucks and the passenger traffics between Lhasa and Kathmandu. And in the past, back in 2005, even we have, when I was secretary in the Ministry of Labor and Transport Management, we have tried to run passenger bus service between Lhasa and Kathmandu, but it could not be continued due to the Chinese side not issuing sufficient visa for the passenger traffic. So I think there are certain problems. Say, for example, we concluded Nepal Tibet Trade Facilitation Committee, creation of Nepal Tibet Trade Facilitation Committee in 2009, and zero tariff agreement for Nepalese goods in Chinese market in 2010, and finally, of course, the transit transport agreement. All these agreements, of course, they are in the paper, but they have not yet been really implemented in action. So we have to see, you see, when we talk about the transport connectivity and all these things, we have been the losers in our trade with China. If you see the trade figure with China, it is very much dismal. I just checked the last 5 years trade data. The last year, 2020, 2021, last fiscal year, we have had the import of 234 billion rupees, but we had export of only 1 billion rupees, worth of 1 billion. So it is a huge gap. And the last year, it is worse in the sense that we had the least export in the last 5 years, and we had the maximum and the highest export over the last 5 years. So I think this is the situation. But what I see that we have to have some regular dialogue, and there are some dialogue mechanism between the two instruments, between the two governments, but it has not been so effective. So I have been insisting that let there be a review of all these agreements and of all these provisions, whether they are really working according to their objective or not. We are talking about the zero tariff in Chinese market, but we have not been able to utilize it. Even a small percentage of that has also not been utilized. So I think there is need of constant dialogue between the government agencies and go on implementing the provisions of the agreement. So, and fourth point, just I want to highlight is about we are talking about the transit services. But unfortunately, we don't have our transit policy. We have only the trade policy, and the provision of the transit is very, it does not get any attention in the trade policy. There is very little provisions mentioned on that. So what I think that since we are situated between the two big giant neighbors, and we are talking about from since the last 15-16 years, we are talking about the transit services between the two countries. We have to have our one dedicated transit policy, and if we have that transit policy, then we can talk with our neighbors based on that very policy. I think these are some of the points that I wanted to highlight. If there are any questions, I will be happy to answer that. Thank you. I stop here. Subhangi.
Thank you for your valuable commentary, sir. I think we will be going towards the questions at the end of the webinar when all of our speakers have spoken, if that's okay. So I'd like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Lakshman Bosnitji, to kindly give his provide a commentary on this topic.
धन्यवाद शुभांगी जी। अब धन्यवाद शुभांगी जी। किन हैन
I सुनिए
Sir, we can see you, sir.
ठीक छ, ओके,
सुनिए।
ठीक छ। अनि मैले अब यो सरसर हेर्दाखेरि जुन प्रेजेन्टेसन भयो त्यसमा करिब सम्पूर्ण कुराहरू चाहिँ कभर भएको जस्तो लाग्यो। त्यसमा नि पूर्व सचिवज्यूले धेरै कुराहरू थप्नु गर्दाखेरि मैले त यहाँ बोल्नु पर्ने कुराहरू पनि धेरै छ जस्तो मलाई लागेन। तैपनि केही प्र्याक्टिकल एस्पेक्टका कुराहरू नीतिगत मात्रै होइन व्यावहारिक कुराहरू पनि प्रेजेन्टेसनमा चाहिँ अघि आयो। जस्तो कि के अरे हाम्रो उत्तरतिरको हामीले चाहिँ त्यो ट्रान्सपोर्टेसनको रुट खोलेपछि के सिनेरियो भयो त भनेर एउटा चाहिँ राम्रो डाटाहरु सहित प्रेजेन्ट गरेको थियो। त्यो हेर्दाखेरि हामीले एक्सपेक्टेड रूपमा चाहिँ नर्थ करिडोरबाट एक्सपोर्ट इम्पोर्टको चाहिँ एक्सपेक्टेड रूपमा चाहिँ हुन सकेको जस्तो सिनेरियो आएन। त्यो स्वाभाविकै पनि हो। किन हो भन्दाखेरि हामीले यो उत्तरी करिडोर अथवा नर्थ ट्रान्जिट पोइन्टहरु ट्रान्सपोर्टेसनका पोइन्टहरुलाई चाहिँ हामीले लिनुको मुख्य उद्देश्य चाहिँ जुन युएन कन्भेन्सन अनुसार चाहिँ 1982 को युएन कन्भेन्सन अनुसार हामीले के अरे ट्रान्जिट र ट्रान्सपोर्टको सुविधा पाउने ल्यान्डलक कन्ट्रीले पाउने भन्ने जुन कुराहरुको अनुरूप हामीले त्यो उत्तरीतिरको पनि हामीले पाएको हो। यसको एग्रीमेन्ट हेर्दाखेरि र कानुनी कुराहरु हेर्दाखेरि पनि हाम्रो बेस त्यही हो। तर यही क्वेशन चाहिँ मैले कहाँनेरबाट सुरु गरिरहेको छु भने हामीले उत्तरतिर अथवा चाइनासँगको ट्रान्जिट ट्रान्सपोर्टेसन एग्रीमेन्ट र प्रोटोकलबाट हामीले के कस्ता किसिमका हडल्सहरु छन्, किन हामीले एक्सपेक्टेड रूपमा भएन भन्ने कुराहरुमा अलिकति म त्यतातिर मात्रै जान्छु। समग्रमा अरु कुराहरु आइसकेका छ। अब यहाँ करिब मैले भन्नुपर्ने विषय चाहिँ हामी नर्थ साइडतिर जाँदाखेरि हामीले प्राप्त गर्ने विषय भनेको पोर्ट शिप अनि ट्रेडका रुटहरु, ट्रान्सपोर्टका मोडालिटिजहरु, प्रोसिजरहरु, यिनै कुराहरु राखेर हामीले एग्रीमेन्ट र प्रोटोकलमा दुईटै कुराहरु परेको छ। अब के अरे अलिकति यो डाटाहरू हेर्दाखेरि 1 वर्ष 2 वर्ष 3 वर्षको डाटा हेर्दाखेरि हामीले के कुरो चाहिँ अलिकति फोकस गर्नुपर्ने हुन्छ भने पोर्टुगल बनाउँदाखेरि हामीले जुन 3 वर्षको कुरा आयो 3 वर्ष पछाडि मात्रै हामीले पोर्टुगल बनायौँ र यसको स्मुथली अपरेसन गर्ने एउटा इन्भाइरोमेन्ट बनायौँ। त्यो चाहिँ अलिकति हाम्रो लागि के अरे सेटब्याकै भएको हो भन्छु मैले चाहिँ। किनभने एग्रिमेन्ट हुने बित्तिकै प्रोटोकललाई हामीले टाइमली गर्नुपर्ने हाम्रो हिजोको प्र्याक्टिस थियो। जस्तो इन्डियाहरूसँग अरू कन्ट्रीसँग हुँदा पनि जस्तो हाम्रो पूर्व सचिवज्यूहरू हुँदाखेरि मैले हेर्दाखेरि पनि के देखाएको थिएँ भनेदेखि पोर्टुगल र एग्रिमेन्टलाई चाहिँ करिब करिब सँगसँगै जस्तो गर्ने हाम्रो विगतको प्र्याक्टिसलाई हामीले अलिकति डेभिएट भएको जस्तो मलाई लाग्छ। एउटा हामी त्यहाँ ल्याकिङ भयौँ, मलाई त्यस्तो लाग्यो। अब अर्को कुरो के अरे इन्ट्री र एक्जिट पोइन्टहरू पनि हाम्रो लागि इक्वल इम्पोर्टेन्ट छन्। र यसका लागि चाहिँ जुन 6वटा इन्ट्री एक्जिट पोइन्टहरू चाहिँ पोर्टुगलमा आयो 3 वर्ष पछाडि थियो। पहिलेबाट चाहिँ हामीले बाइलेटरल हिसाबले चाहिँ ट्रेडमा हामी के अरे गरिराखेका थियौँ, तर थर्ड कन्ट्रीको ट्रेडको लागि अलिकति त्योभन्दा फरक हिसाबले चाहिँ इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर चाहिने हुँदा त्यो कुराहरू हामीहरूसँग चाहिँ अलिकति टाइममा हाम्रो एउटा हुन नसकेको हो कि जस्तो मलाई लाग्छ एउटा त्यो कुराहरू पनि। अनि प्रोसिडियल कुराहरू त पोर्टुगलमा आयो। अब यो 3 वर्षको जब ग्यापमा हामीले पोर्टुगल र के अरे एग्रिमेन्टको ग्याप चाहिँ 3 वर्षको भयो। यो कारणले गर्दाखेरि हामीले एउटा प्राइभेट सेक्टरलाई इमिडिएट हामीले चाहिँ लान सक्ने अवस्था नभएको कारणले पनि अलिकति त्यो प्रब्लम भएको हो कि जस्तो डिले भएको कारणले त्यहाँ इम्प्याक्ट पर्यो कि जस्तो मलाई लाग्छ। अब त्यस्तै के अरे अर्को डिले भएको कारण चाहिँ र हाम्रो ट्रेडको भोल्युमहरू चाहिँ जब हाम्रो पोर्टुगलको 3 वर्षसम्म भनौँ न करिब करिब 3 वर्षसम्म चाहिँ पोर्टुगल हाम्रो बन्न नसक्दाखेरि जब हाम्रो व्यापारीहरू हाम्रो प्राइभेट सेक्टरहरू त साउथतिर युज टु थियो पहिलेदेखि नै, त्यहीँ बसेर काम गरिरहेको प्र्याक्टिस थियो। त्यसले गर्दाखेरि उनीहरूले फेरि त्यो रिरुट भनौँ अथवा फेरि साउथतिर नै उनीहरू डाइभर्ट भएको जस्तो मलाई लाग्छ। जे भए पनि समग्रमा भन्नुपर्दाखेरि हामीलाई डिपेन्डेन्सीको हिसाबमा केही रिड्युस चाहिँ भएको छ नर्थतिरको पोर्टले, तर साउथका पोर्टहरूलाई रिप्लेसै गर्ने अवस्थामा चाहिँ हामीहरू पुग्न सक्नेको अवस्था देखिँदैन। अब अर्को एउटा कुरो यहाँ मलाई अलिकति त्यो यो अघि श्रद्धाजीको प्रेजेन्टेसनमा पनि थियो, त्यो कुरामा मैले पहिले पनि अलिकति मेरो आफ्नै किसिमको रिजर्भेसनहरू राखेको थिएँ। 2020 पछाडि चाहिँ सटडाउन नर्थतिर चाहिँ सटडाउन भन्ने कुराहरू आयो। अघि प्रेजेन्टेसनमा पनि अलिकति त्यो कुराहरू छोएको देखेँ मैले। त्यहाँ मलाई अलिकति भन्न चाहिँ के मन लाग्छ भनेदेखि तातो पानी चाहिँ एकदमै नोमिनल हिसाबको चाहिँ मुभमेन्ट भयो कस्टमको डाटाहरू हेर्दाखेरि। रसुवामा पनि इन्टरप्सन भइराख्यो त्यहाँको अपरेसन चाहिँ। अनि त्यस्तै के अरे अब डे खुलेको दिन पनि ट्रकहरू चाहिँ एकदम मिनिमम रूपमा चाहिँ ट्रकको मुभमेन्टहरू हुने खालको वातावरण पनि भयो। विभिन्न किसिमले चाहिँ अब त्यहाँ भनौँ न अब नर्थतिर चाहिँ इकोनोमिक आस्पेक्ट अघि पुरुषोत्तम सरले भन्नुभयो, इकोनोमिक पनि हुनसक्छ, त्यस्तै पोलिटिकल पनि हुनसक्छ, सेक्युरिटी पनि हुनसक्छ। यी विभिन्न कारणहरूले गर्दाखेरि हाम्रो नर्थतिरको चाहिँ स्मुथ अपरेसनहरू पनि नभएको अवस्था छ। त्यसले गर्दाखेरि के अरे प्राइभेट सेक्टरहरू अलिकति हामीले नर्थतिर आकर्षित गर्न नसकेको हो कि गभर्मेन्टको अलिकति त्यहाँ चाहिँ फोकस नपुगेको हो कि। अनि त्यस्तै एग्रिमेन्टमा भएको चाहिँ त्यो एउटा डिस्प्युट रिजोल्युसन कमिटी कि के कमिटी भन्ने एउटा छ, त्यो कमिटीको टाइम टु टाइम नभएको हो कि मिटिङहरू, त्यो कुरा पनि अलिकति मलाई चाहिँ त्यस्तो लाग्छ। अब यी कुराहरू छन्। अब तैपनि जिस्टमा भन्नुपर्दाखेरि चाहिँ हामीसँग यसका अपर्च्युनिटीहरू पनि छ नर्थतिरको के अरे खोलेपछि हामीलाई छ। किनभने हामीलाई दुई हाम्रो त दुईटा ठुला छिमेकी भए, दुईटै मुलुकहरूको चाहिँ हामीले इक्वल्ली पोर्ट रुट रेल भनौँ न अरू यो चाहिँ मल्टिडाइमेन्सनल कनेक्टिभिटीका मेजरहरू हामीले चाहिँ प्रयोग गर्न पाउँदाखेरि के अरे यो हाम्रो लागि चाहिँ बेनिफिटै हुन्छ। दुईटैतिर हामीले बनाउनु पर्ने त छ, तर पनि नर्थतिरको ले एउटा चाहिँ के चाहिँ देखिएको छ अलिकति भने सरस्वती हेर्दाखेरि बुझ्दाखेरि जापान अथवा इस्ट चाइना भनौँ न, जापान कोरिया त्यो तिरबाट आउँदाखेरि चाहिँ हामीहरूको अघि कुरा आयो, त्यो प्रेजेन्टेसनमा पनि थियो, झन्डै 1/5 चाहिँ हाम्रो डिस्टेन्स छ। यो इन्डियाको रुटभन्दा पोर्टभन्दा चाइनाको पोर्ट चाहिँ 1/5 को डिस्टेन्सको जुन कुराहरू पनि आयो, त्यो भए पनि इस्टर्न चाइनाबाट जस्तो जापान कोरियाबाट सामानहरू आउँदाखेरि चाहिँ जुन किसिमको लामो पिरियड लाग्थ्यो साउथ पोर्टबाट कलकत्ता हल्दियाबाट आउँदाखेरि अथवा भाइज्याकबाट आउँदाखेरि, त्योभन्दा टाइम चाहिँ यताको कन्ज्युम हुन्छ। त्यो टाइम कन्ज्युम भए पनि यताबाट आउँदाखेरि अघि प्रेजेन्टेसनमा नै आयो, हाम्रो चाहिँ जस्तो पेट्रोल भयो, कोइला भयो, के अरे आइरन ब्लेडहरू भए, बल्क कार्गोको रूपमा चाहिँ हामीलाई आउन चाहिँ यतापट्टिबाट अलिकति गाह्रो हुने अवस्था छ। यी भए पनि हामीले हाम्रो लागि डिपेन्डेन्सी चाहिँ नर्थतिरको पोर्टहरूको उसबाट डिपेन्डेन्सी चाहिँ केही न केही कम भएको छ र साउथतिर हामीलाई चाहिँ एउटा चाहिँ के अरे कुनै पनि यो ट्रेड ट्रान्जिटको कुराहरूमा, ट्रान्सपोर्टेसनको कुराहरूमा एउटा टेबलमा बसेर बार्गेनिङ गर्नको लागि चाहिँ एउटा स्ट्रङ पोइन्ट पनि यसले बनाउँछ जस्तो मलाई लाग्छ। अब हो, दुईतिरैका देशहरूबाट ट्रेड र ट्रान्जिट ट्रान्सपोर्टेसनको हामीले चाहिँ यो अपर्च्युनिटी पाउनु हाम्रो लागि ठुलो मतलब राम्रो कुरो हो ट्रेडको लागि, फेसिलिटेसनको लागि। तैपनि अब उत्तरतिरकै कुरा गर्ने हो भने केही कुराहरू अझै पनि हामीले चाहिँ कसरी समाधान गर्ने भन्ने विषयहरू चाहिँ हाम्रो लागि चुनौतीकै विषयहरू पनि देख्दछु मैले। जस्तो हामी चाहिँ कस्तो अवस्थामा छौँ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ जुन हिमालय माउन्टेनको जुन छ त्यो चाहिँ हाम्रो लागि अलिकति टाइम र कस्ट रिड्युस गर्नलाई चाहिँ गाह्रो छ, नम्बर 1। दोस्रो कुरो, रेलको कनेक्टिभिटी अघि नै आइसक्यो, पूर्व वक्ताज्यूले भनिसक्नुभयो, हाम्रो लागि नर्थतिरको रेलको कनेक्टिभिटी चाहिँ के हो भन्ने बारेमा अझै हामी क्लियर छैन। जबसम्म हामी रेलको चाहिँ के अरे यो जुन यो 4000 को डिस्टेन्समा चाहिँ हामीले नर्थतिरबाट रेलबाट ल्याउनु पर्ने अवस्था हुन्छ टाइम के अरे कस्ट रिड्युस गर्नको लागि, त्यो गर्ने हो भने त हाम्रो के अरे सिआइएफ बोर्डर गर्नु पर्यो एउटा, र दोस्रो कुरो चाहिँ रेल पनि हाम्रो चाहिँ काठमाडौँसम्म ल्याउन सक्ने अवस्थामा हामी जानुपर्ने हुन्छ। त्यो सम्भव छ कि छैन? यदि सम्भव भएन भने कस्ट र टाइम घट्छ कि घट्दैन, र कस्ट र टाइम घटेन भने हामीले प्राइभेट सेक्टरलाई एउटा एस्योर गर्न सक्छौँ कि सक्दैनौँ, यो एउटा चाहिँ गभर्नरको लागि चुनौतीको विषय मलाई लाग्छ। अब त्यस्तै के अरे डिस्टेन्सको पनि मैले कुरा राखिसकेँ होइन। अब कलकत्ताबाट 700 चान्चुनको छ, अघि प्रेजेन्टेसनमा नै देखियो। भोलि गएर हामीले चाहिँ धामरा अथवा यो अर्को खुलिसक्यो यो के अरे मुन्ड्रा पोर्टहरूको पनि हामीले इन्डियासँग गरिसक्यौँ। भोलि त्यसले हाम्रो अरूतिरको ड्राई पोर्टहरू, साउथतिर पनि हाम्रो धेरै ड्राई पोर्टहरू बनिसक्यो, इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर राम्रो आइसक्यो। त्यो अवस्थामा हाम्रो उत्तरतिरको ड्राई पोर्टहरूलाई पनि हामीले हेरौँ न, अहिले रसुवा तातो पानी सकियो, रसुवा अन्डर कन्स्ट्रक्सन छ, त्यस पछाडि त हामी अहिले चुप्लाएर बसेका छौँ। त्यसले गर्दाखेरि अलिकति हामीले कुन चाहिँ पोर्टहरू हाम्रो लागि चाहिँ कुन रिजनको लागि हुन्छ भन्ने पनि हिसाबले चाहिँ अलिकति गभर्नमेन्टले सोच्नुपर्छ जस्तो मलाई लाग्छ। साथसाथै अब च्यालेन्जकै कुरा गर्ने हो भने त्यहाँ अब अघि आइसकेको कुराहरू मैले दोहोऱ्याउनु त नपर्ला, हाम्रो इन्टर ब्याङ्क मार्केटको कुराहरू पनि आउला, एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिभ हसल्सको कुरा पनि आउला, अनि डकुमेन्टेसनको कुरा आउला, ल्याङ्ग्वेज ब्यारियरका कुराहरू पनि छन् हाम्रो। जसरी साउथतिर हाम्रो सहज छ, नर्थतिर त्यो पनि सहज छैन, त्यसलाई कसरी एड्रेस गर्ने भन्ने पनि कुराहरू छ। हाम्रो टाइम कन्स्टेन्ट छ, नर्थतिरका टाइमहरू हामीहरू हेरौँ 3 घन्टाको डिस्टेन्स फरक छ। म एकचोटि इन्टरमोलको एडी हुँदाखेरि म त्यहाँ गएँ, त्यस्तै भएर नेपालतिर के अरे 2 बजेको छ, उनीहरूको 5 बजे चाहिँ क्लोज गरिदिन्छ उतातिर। हाम्रो गएर 1 रात हामीले त्यहाँ राख्नुपर्ने अवस्था हुन्छ। त्यसले गर्दाखेरि त्यो बारेमा पनि हामीले चाहिँ अब बायोलेटरल टकबाट फुकाउनु पर्ने कुराहरू चाहिँ अघि पुरुषोत्तम सरले भन्नुभयो, प्रोसिड्युरमा अथवा हाम्रो प्रोटोकलमा अझै धेरै कुराहरू बाँकी छन् भनेको हुनाले मैले त्यो कुरामा यस्ता कुराहरू पनि हामीले समावेश गरेर एड्रेस गर्न सके हुन्थ्यो कि, किनभने हाम्रो ल्याङ्ग्वेज ब्यारियर छ, उतापट्टिको आफ्नो एउटा सिस्टम छ, त्यसलाई हामीले कसरी गर्ने भन्ने कुराहरू पनि आउला। त्यस्तै अब अब मैले उतापट्टिको कुराहरू गरेँ, नेपालपट्टिको हामीहरूको खोइ त यत्रो हामीले पूर्व पश्चिमको नर्थ साउथ करिडोरको कुराहरू गरिरहेका छौँ, खोइ हामीले अहिलेसम्म किमाथानका विराटनगरको त्यस्तै तातो पानीको रोडलाई हामीले किन लेन बनाउन सकेका छैनौँ, त्यस्तै किन रसुवाको गर्न सकेका छैनौँ। के अरे मुस्ताङको कुरा गर्ने हो भने उतापट्टि यस्तो राम्रो बाटो र राम्रो चाहिँ के अरे इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर तयार भएको छ। आजभन्दा 4 वर्ष अगाडि म जाँदाखेरि हामीले नेपाल साइडको गर्न सकेका छैनौँ। यी मूलभूत कुराहरू हुन् जसले गर्दाखेरि हाम्रो ट्रेडर्सहरूलाई एस्योर गराउने आधारहरू चाहिँ यी कुराहरूमा अलिकति हामीले प्रोटोकलबाटै गर्ने कि लेटर अफ एक्सचेन्जबाट गर्ने कि अथवा अन्डरस्ट्यान्डिङबाट गर्ने कि कुन मोडालिटीबाट हामीले गर्ने, त्यो कुरामा चाहिँ गभर्नमेन्टको अलिकति फोकस हुनुपर्छ जस्तो मलाई लाग्छ। अब लास्टमा मैले भन्नुपर्दाखेरि चाहिँ जे जस्तो भए पनि यी जतिसुकै भए पनि हाम्रो लागि नर्थ हो, तर ट्रेडर्स र हाम्रो टाइम र कस्टको कुरा गर्ने भने साउथतिर चाहिँ हाम्रो चाहिँ जुन के अरे अपर्च्युनिटीहरू र अहिले चाहिँ ट्रेडिसनल हामीले गरिरहेको कुराहरूलाई चेन्ज गर्नको लागि धेरै नै हामीले एक्सर्साइज गर्नुपर्ने हुन्छ। ती एक्सर्साइजहरू भित्र चाहिँ के हो त भन्दाखेरि मैले आफ्नो एक्सपिरियन्सको आधारमा एउटा दुईटा कुराहरू अघि पुरुषोत्तम सरले 3-4 कुरा भने जस्तै मैले के कुरो भन्न चाहिरहेको छु भने अब मैले अघि प्रेजेन्टेसनमा देखेको एउटा कुरालाई मैले के भन्नुपर्छ भने चाइनिजसँग मेरो जतिखेर कुराहरू हुँदाखेरि मुस्ताङको चाहिँ तातो पानी र रसुवालाई मुस्ताङमा ट्रान्सपोर्ट गर्ने भन्ने कुराहरू त्यहाँ प्रेजेन्टेसनमा भए जस्तो लाग्यो मलाई। त्यो मलाई हो जस्तो लाग्दैन। जतिखेर मेरो एम्बेसीसँग कुराहरू हुँदाखेरि चाइनिजहरूले प्यारलली त्यसलाई पनि अगाडि बढाउन खोजेको थियो। किन भन्दाखेरि त्यसको एउटै आधार थियो उनीहरूको भनाइ चाहिँ रसुवा र तातो पानीको अघि सरहरूले भने जस्तो पूर्व वक्ताले भने जस्तै फ्रजाइल ल्यान्ड छ, त्यो अलिकति हाम्रो लागि सधैँ सेन्सिटिभ छ हैन। अब तातो पानीको कुरा गर्ने हो भने त तातो पानी ड्राइपोर्ट त उनीहरूले चाहिँ भूकम्प आएर ध्वस्त बनाएपछि करिब 80% काम भइसकेपछि त्यसलाई छोडिदिइरहेको थियो। धेरै ठुलो मेहनत गर्नु पर्यो र तातो पानीसम्म उनीहरूले बनाइदियो। अझै पनि हामीले गभर्नमेन्टले तातो पानीलाई अगाडि बढाउनलाई विशेष पहल गर्नुपर्ने मलाई लाग्छ। अब उनीहरूले मुस्ताङ जान खोजेको कारण चाहिँ के छ भने जुन रसुवादेखि काठमाडौँसम्मको बाटो र तातो पानीदेखि काठमाडौँसम्मको बाटो जुन छ त्यो बाटोलाई उनीहरूले अझै पनि त्यो फ्रजाइल ल्यान्ड भएको हुनाले त्यसलाई अझै उनीहरू क्लियर छैन, ठुलो बनाउन सकिन्छ कि सकिँदैन भन्ने हिसाबमा। त्यो भन्दा मुस्ताङको चाहिँ बेटर छ भन्ने उनीहरूको चाहिँ स्टडी रहेछ। त्यस्तै मैले के अरे किमाथाङमा पनि लान खोजेको थिएँ। किमाथाङमा चाहिँ हाम्रो नेपालमा जसरी फ्रजाइल ल्यान्ड छ त्यस्तै चाइनापट्टि छ भन्ने कुराहरू आयो। त्यसले गर्दा मैले किन यो कुरा राखिरहेको छु भने अलिकति इरिलेभेन्ट कुरा पनि होला। हाम्रो नेपालको परिवेश यो छ, त्यसले गर्दाखेरि मुस्ताङ जान चाहिँ उनीहरू यसरी खोजिरहेको छ भन्ने मेरो कुराहरू हो। अब अर्को एउटा कुरा चाहिँ अब अलिकति मलाई लागेको चाहिँ के भने गभर्नमेन्ट भन्ने बित्तिकै हाम्रो एम्बेसीहरू इकोनोमिक काउन्सिलरहरूको पनि गभर्नमेन्टको विङमा पर्ने हुनाले यी सबै हाम्रा ट्रेड सम्बन्धी ट्रान्जिट सम्बन्धी जति पनि हडल्सहरू हुन्छन् अलिकति एम्बेसीहरूले र इकोनोमिक काउन्सिलरले आफ्नो रोल चाहिँ बढाउनु पर्ने मेरो चाहिँ एक्सपिरियन्स छ। मलाई चाहिँ एकदमै बिटर एक्सपिरियन्स छ भनौँ न। एम्बेसीको भूमिका चाहिँ जतिखेर मैले तातो पानी र रसुवालाई त्यो ड्राइपोर्ट बनाउनको लागि चाहिँ जति पहल गरेँ अर्थ मन्त्रालय भौतिक मन्त्रालयबाट एम्बेसीको रोल चाहिँ एकदमै मैले त्यतिखेर सपोर्ट पाइनँ। त्यसले गर्दाखेरि त्यो पार्टहरू पनि अलिकति प्रेजेन्टेसनमा अलिकति त्यसलाई फेसिलिटेट गर्न चाहिँ रोल हुनुपर्छ जस्तो लाग्यो। अनि लास्टली चाहिँ म के भन्छु भनेदेखि अन्तमा चाहिँ यो हामीले प्रोटोकल गऱ्यौँ 2019मा 16मा गएर एग्रिमेन्ट गऱ्यौँ। हामीले अहिलेसम्म त्यस पछाडि किन यो ट्रेडको भोल्युम हामीले बढाउन सकिएन, के गर्दा प्राइभेट सेक्टरलाई चाहिँ हामी त्यहाँ लान सकिन्छ, कसरी हामीले चाहिँ उनीहरूले यता मोटिभेट गर्ने र गभर्नमेन्टले अरू थप के सपोर्ट गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने बारेमा मिनिस्ट्री अफ कमर्स अथवा अर्थ मन्त्रालय अथवा हाम्रो चाहिँ परराष्ट्र मन्त्रालयले एउटा राम्रै स्टडी गर्नुपर्छ कि विशेष स्टडी यही दुईटा प्रोटोकलको इम्प्लिमेन्टेसनमा भन्ने चाहिँ मलाई त्यो पनि लाग्छ। र अब कुराहरू सबै आइसकेका छ। मैले कुनै कुराहरू चाहिँ यसमा क्लियर नभएका कुराहरू र मेरो एक्सपिरियन्सले लागेको के अरे भन्नुपर्ने कुराहरू छ भने म कसैबाट त्यस्तो प्रश्न आएछ भने म त्यतिखेरै समावेश गर्ने गरी कुराहरू धेरै छ तर मलाई टाइम दिएको अनुसारमै जान खोजेर यही अहिले चाहिँ अनुमति माग्छु बन्द गर्ने धन्यवाद
Sir, thank you for your valuable commentary. म फेरि रिमाइन्ड गर्न चाहन्छु क्वेसन्सहरु चाहिँ once all of the speakers have spoken त्यसपछि हामी क्वेसन्सहरु एन्टरटेन गर्छौं. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. Now we'd like to ask our last speaker, special speaker, Namrata Sharma ji, to kindly comment.
Thank you, Shubhangi. सबभन्दा पहिला त सबैजनालाई नमस्कार अनि CSIF लाई मलाई बोलाउनु भएकोमा धन्यवाद. It was a interesting experience to sit and listen to all the presenters before me. सबैजना तपाईहरु एक्सपर्ट हुनुहुन्छ यो नेपाल चाइना रिलेसनमा र यो ट्रान्जिट अग्रीमेन्टमा पनि. म अनि अहिले जति पनि कुरा भइसकेको छ including the presentation that was presented by CSIF and then the comments by the two experts, म त्यो रिपिट नगरिकन एउटा अर्कै एंगलबाट कुरा गर्न चाहन्छु अहिले. र हुन त मलाई श्रद्धाजीको त्यो प्रेजेन्टेसनमा कमेन्ट गर्न भनेर रिक्वेस्ट गरिएको थियो तर अब पहिला मैले त्यो पाएर स्टडी त गर्न पाएको छैन तर तपाईको कुरा सुन्दाखेरि त्यहाँ के देखिया छ भने डिफिकल्टीज त्यो ट्रान्सपोर्ट अग्रीमेन्ट हाम्रो भयो 16 मा हैन त्यसपछिको कार्यान्वयन हुने काममा चाहिँ नि जुन हामीले कठिनाई भोगिरहेका छौं त्यो कुराहरू एकदम प्रष्टसँग त्यहाँ उल्लेख भएको छ. त्यसलाई म रिपिट गर्न चाहन्न किनभने मभन्दा अगाडिको दुईटा वक्ताज्यूहरूले पनि उहाँहरू एक्सपर्ट पनि हो उहाँहरूको आफ्नो ओपिनियन आइसकेको छ. I want to draw you to a different aspect. Okay, we all know that being a landlocked country, Nepal needs transit, right? And we have the closest transits that we can do is north and south. तर यहाँ कुरा के छ भने साउथ सँगको हाम्रो रिलेसन प्लस युनिक रिलेशनशिप इन द सेन्स त्यो पिपल टु पिपल को कुरा गरे हैन मैले अहिले. द border ओपन border जुन रिलेसन छ त्यसले गर्दाखेरि परापूर्व कालदेखि एउटा सोशल कल्चरल रिलिजियस हरेक किसिमको रिलेशनशिपबाट त्यो अगाडि बढ्दै गइरहेको छ हैन र त्यहाँबाट नेचुरली ओपन एक्सेस पाउनलाई एउटा सजिलो कुरा किन हुन गयो भन्दाखेरि एउटा दुईटा कन्ट्री बीचको रिलेशनशिप एक ठाउँमा छ. त्यहाँ भएका ट्रिटिजहरुमा हुनुपर्ने अनुमोदनहरुतिर हामी अहिले जाँदै नजाउँ हैन तर पिपल टु पिपल रिलेशनशिपले पनि त्यो सजिलो पारिदिएको छ. तर अनफर्चुनेटली नेपालले विभिन्न यो ट्रेड एम्बार्गोजहरु फेस गर्यो डाउन साउथबाट र त्यसमा पनि कस्तो भन्दाखेरि एम्बार्गो हुने तर हामीले गरेर होइन तिमीहरुकै मधेसमा भएको जनताले गरेको भन्ने आवाज पनि आउने. तर अनफर्चुनेटली त्यो भएपछि फेरि यतापटि हाम्रो पोलिटिशियन्सहरुले चाहिँ नि ल अर्को खुलासा निकालु न त भनेर moving over to the northern side. Now, northern side and southern side neighbors of Nepal can never be ignored by Nepal, neither can they ignore us. But we have to look into who has a bigger need for open transit on both sides and who has a bigger need of getting in goods into Nepal. हामी नै हो त्यो त नेपाली people. However, both the countries also being part of UN and all the noted international treaties, they also have a necessity and a need to make sure that the country which is sandwiched in between them get their rightful dues whenever it is necessary. झन् त्यो पनि इमर्जेन्सी केसमा हैन. लास्ट टाइम हामीलाई इन्डियाबाट ट्रेड एम्बार्गो भएको कस्तो बेलामा पर्या थियो त भन्दाखेरि हामी भर्खर अर्थक्वेकबाट निस्किरहेका थियौं. हामीसँग इलेक्ट्रिसिटी डिफिसिट थियो. हामी लोड शेडिङमा घण्टौं परिरहेका थियौं र त्यति बेला म आफै आई रिमेम्बर I had elderly people at home who were shivering in the cold. तर इन्डिया जस्तो डेमोक्रेटिक कन्ट्री र हाम्रो स्पेसल रिलेसनसिप भएको कन्ट्रीले पनि अनफर्चुनेटली त्यहाँ त्यो कुरालाई इग्नोर गरेर हामीले होइन तिमीहरूकै मिस्टेकले भनेर है। अब यतापट्टि चाइनासँग हाम्रो रिलेसन पहिला पनि थियो, बढाउनु पर्यो र ट्रान्जिट पनि खोल्नु पर्यो। And plus, Nepal is one of the countries which has actually supported China's BRI initiative, right? तर ल हुन्छ ट्रान्जिट खोलिदिन्छु भनेर agreement भयो, the trade agreement was signed, but unfortunately again when are we facing the brunt from our northern neighbor is at the time when the pandemic has hit the country, and Nepal, already being a developing country, has already faced difficulties getting goods inside, and the Nepali people are suffering because they need the day-to-day stuff. Ani etako transit banda bhairahach. Okay, now I'm not going to go into the points that you've already shared on the distance. Even if we have an open transit, vibrant transit, the distance that is there between India and China. What I want to focus over here in today's discussion is, why are we allowing two of our neighbors, whether down south or up north, to mess with our lives? And both these countries are supposed to be, one is moving forward as one of the biggest democratic countries, biggest and oldest. The other one has a capitalist structure forced into socialism, whatever, communism. And then they also say they have a good relation with Nepal, now that Nepal is also turning, having a left movement coming forward. Who is letting both these countries mess with the lives of the Nepal and Nepali people? It's our politicians. मेरो अगाडिको दुईजना वक्ताहरूले उहाँहरू गभर्नमेन्टमा काम गरेर एक्सपर्ट भएर आउनु भएको छ, they know more the intricacies, and I have observed a lot of things too. What I feel is, हामीले कुनै पनि agreement, कुनै पनि treaties, whatever we sign, there has to be proper homework. मलाई अब यो पनि भन्दा भन्दा वाक्क लागिसक्यो कि होमवर्क हुँदैन, डिस्कसन हुँदाखेरि राम्रोसँग नेपाली पक्ष अगाडि जाँदैन भन्दा भन्दा पनि वाक्क लागिसक्यो। तर अनफर्चुनेटली यसो हेर्दाखेरि there are loops, there are nooks and cronies which are overlooked, which people keep on overlooking, so that at the time when the implementation of the different agreements are there between countries and Nepal, we always seem to be bearing the brunt of it. Right? त्यसैले अब अघि तपाईहरुले भनेको जस्तो टेक्निकल कुराहरुमा र श्रद्धाको प्रेजेन्टेसनमा आएको कुराहरु all valid. She has shown very clearly the issue of how maybe the fragile landscape of the country and all that. So these are measures that need to be seen beforehand, so that cost is also reduced. And then one thing we also have to understand is, how much is the loan that Nepal going to carry because of different development activities that we do with both the countries that we are neighboring, and not only that, also countries was helping us internationally from abroad, countries like US, Japan, or wherever, European countries and all that. भनेर हाम्रो अब नेपाल भित्र पहिला चाहिँ हेर्दाखेरि एक किसिमको थिंक ट्याङ्क, एक किसिमको आफ्नै रिसर्च, आफ्नै एबिलिटी, आफ्नै काम गर्न सक्ने ह्युमन रिसोर्सको कमी थियो होला। तर at this stage in Nepal, we have human resource in every sectors of different communities and gender also, who can actually lead different activities. The private sector is also coming very strongly and vibrantly. So why aren't the private sectors being utilized? Unfortunately, like Nepal ma एउटा एक किसिमको यो syndicate system जुन छ, cartel system जुन छ, त्यसले गर्दाखेरि पनि vibrant private sector अगाडि आएर negotiation with the with business communities in both sides, up north and down south, हुन नसकेको हो कि? I think these are food for thought that now needs to be discussed in forums like this also. And when researchers are being, like just now the speaker before me, Lakshmanjile भन्नुभएको थियो, कि हाम्रो अग्रिमेन्ट्सहरू साइन नहुने कारण के भयो त अहिले अप नर्थको हामीले कुरा गर्दाखेरि नेपाल गभर्मेन्टले त्यो रिभ्यू गरेर हेरेर पोइन्ट्स निकाल्ने बेला भयो भने आई एग्री विथ यु लक्ष्मणजी तर look at all the research and studies that we have done. Shraddha's research has already shown the different difficulties that has happened even after the agreement and why it's not being implemented. So when is the time for us to actually take action? Is it always the people of Nepal being mobilized in such a way by politicians that we go to the street and protest against projects and development that come into Nepal without even reading the documents? दस्तावेजै नपढिकन स्ट्रिटमा जाने हामी जतिखेर पनि जनताहरू तर वास्तवमा कसलाई हामीले सतर्क बनाउने कसरी हामीले अकाउन्टेबल बनाउने why because at the bottom of the day it comes to the rules and regulations and the negotiation skills of the government and the people in the bureaucracy while dealing with the two neighbors. And of course the other thing also it boils down to the fact is how these two powerful countries are actually trying to rotate Nepal around their fingers, their whims and their wishes. हामी कति बेलासम्म उनीहरूको इच्छामा हामी नाचिराख्ने त हैन कहिले कहिले यो सुन्दाखेरि कस्तो लाग्छ भने प्रजातन्त्र रिस्टोर भइसकेपछि नेपालमा कलम चलाउनेहरूले एक्टिभिजम गर्नेहरूले यस्ता आवाजहरू नउठाएका होइनन् उठिरहेको छ र हाम्रो नेपालको त्यो बेलादेखि अहिलेसम्म पोलिटिकल सिनारियो चेन्ज भएर एब्सोल्युट मोनार्कीबाट रिपब्लिक स्टेटमा पुग्यौं अब कहीँ नभएको एकदम लेफ्ट मुभमेन्ट भनेर अगाडि पनि आइरहेको छ हैन देयर आर लट्स अफ लज मेड proactive for the people of Nepal. However, why aren't we still able to deal with the two neighbors? Why aren't we able to use international laws and treaties and make them accountable? Why duita neighbors harko kasto cha bhane they already are powerful as compared to us. But there's a dynamic between them which also is respective to their own interest in the overall global sector. Not only the three countries here or South Asia or Asia itself. In the global sector, they have a bigger agenda, right? I think at this point, when we are talking about this agreement between Nepal and China, we need to sit down and reflect on these things, on what the bigger pictures are. Why is it always hindering Nepal in getting the basic necessities for the population of the country to survive in the most difficult times? Why are we letting this happen? मेरो विचारमा त्यो पोइन्टमा पनि सोच्नु जरुरी जस्तो लागेको छ मलाई तपाईहरुको रिसर्च कतिको कम्प्लिट भयो थाहा छैन मैले I wanted to read it before giving comments but I was told that it's not completed. Maybe one aspect you could put is on this aspect also and maybe that will help your report your research to have a holistic approach also हैन त्यसैले मेरो विचारमा कस्तो छ भन्दाखेरि हामी अब at this stage अहिलेको जमानामा आएर 2021 मा हामी पुगिसक्यौं हैन यो सेन्चुरीमा पुगिसक्दाखेरि पनि हामी अब नेपाल एज अ नेसन थ्रेटन भएर बस्नु पर्दैन नेपाल सानो भनेर वास्तवमा वर्ल्डमा धेरै सानो कन्ट्री पनि होइन हाम्रो पपुलेसन हेर्ने हो भने पनि we have a huge population and yes we do have neighbors down south and up north who will always be with us forever and there are problems Nepal keeps on getting because of them. We probably have some issues that pinch these two neighbors too. But I think the time has come for Nepali leaders, both in the political sector and activism sector, together with those who write, to raise the point to see why are we allowing this to happen. अस्ति भैँचालो पछि ट्रेड एम्बार्गो भयो इन्डियाले हामीले गरे होइन भन्यो हामीका केही आएन अब मै नै भुक्तभोगी छु कसरी मेरो घरमा भएको एल्डरली र चिल्ड्रनलाई त्यसले दुःख पाए मैले त पाएँ हैन तपाईहरु पनि हुनुहुन्छ होला त्यसपछि अहिले पेन्डेमिकमा आएर ल हो लेफ्ट पार्टीजहरु मर्ज गरेर बनेको पोलिटिकल पार्टी लिडरशिपमा भए बेलामा चाइनाले I will support you भन्यो but when the need was there during the pandemic where were they were not there. So accountability लिन पर्ने जरुरत छ अब accountability कसरी भने bilateralबाट मात्र भएन भने international treatiesहरू र international lawsहरूलाई लिएर accountable बनाएर नेपाललाई, because it's a landlocked country, there are rules and regulations that we should have transit, and we should have a system where we get goods from wherever in the easiest and most cost-effective way. So we have to plan for that. अनि अर्को कुरा कस्तो छ भने planning and policies-हरुमा पनि हाम्रो like यो east west हाइवेमा भएको जुन हामीलाई बाटो घाटो पनि जहिले पनि बिग्रिरहेको हुन्छ हैन, यतातिरको फ्रेजिलिटी र हाम्रो क्लाइमेटको कुरा नै ध्यानसँग गर्न सकेका छैनौं। अब हिमालको कुरामा हामी गइरहेछौं, ओके हैन। र ट्रेन र when we are talking about railways, we are talking about tunnels and all that, we have not been able to establish a railway in the plains where the transportation will be so easy that Nepal's private sector can also flourish. अब हामी हिमालबाट आउने ट्रेनको कुरा गरिरहेछौँ। मलाई सोध्नुहुन्छ भने त ल्याउनुस् हैन। If it is good for climate, if it is good for the people of Nepal, for profit of Nepal, and for the planet itself, you know, we should get it done. But how are we going to do it? नेपाल भित्र काठमाडौँ भ्याली भित्रको सडक हेर्नुस् त, अहिले यहाँ कति प्रेग्नेन्ट महिलाहरू हस्पिटलमा जाँदाखेरि यो भित्र भ्याली भित्रको बाटोले बिग्रेर चाहिँ नि हेल्थ प्रब्लम्सहरू भइरहेछ है। let's forget about the remote sectors. So now when we are coming back to my, I want to end now by saying yes, I think all the points that has been highlighted by CSIF research has been well noted. I think you need to also incorporate over there the overall motive and intention and the negotiation skills of our leaders, our activists, and the two countries, India and China. And particularly because we are talking at the moment about the agreement with China, let's focus there and their overall interest, you know. So why is it that these two countries are getting away by violating all human rights that is there according to the international rules? अब China particular human rights issues ma धेरै जाने चाहन्न अहिले, that itself is a different debate कुरा। तर हामीले कुरा गर्दाखेरि यी सब कुराहरू पनि गर्नुपर्ने हुन्छ। डिफिकल्टीज त हो, तपाईले लाइन डाउन गरे अनुसार खोल्नै सकेका छैन, बट एट दिस पोइन्ट यो अग्रिमेन्टको कुरामा हामीले गर्दाखेरि why and who gave them the right? Is the right given in the agreement for them to close down during the pandemic? The virus is supposed to have come from China itself, right? All over the world. अनि हामीलाई चाहिने गुड्सहरू स्टप गरेर प्राइभेट सेक्टरलाई डिफिकल्टी बनाउने, why was there the need of agreement? Once somebody signs the agreement, if they back off from it, what is the action that needs to be done? So हाम्रो फोरममा अब we also need to talk about issues like that, हैन। नेपालमा at this point आएर पनि, before wrapping up, I just want to put this on the floor, you know. Why do these things happen at different points, हैन? Why are different international projects coming create havoc in the country, right? Why are people drawn into the streets? जतिखेर पनि पिपललाई अन्जाना बनाएर लिडर्सहरूले अगाडि बढाउने हो कि? And then when we come to the treaties that we have between our neighbors, how can we improve our capacity to make sure that we put a stop to, especially the trade and transit treaties, which will stop goods coming into Nepal for basic necessities of the Nepali people? So these are also points that needs to be reflected in the research, Shuvangi and Shraddha. But it was a pleasure listening to CSIF presentation and also the views put forward by Purushottamji and Lakshmanji. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Namrataji. Thank you to all of our speakers. I would like to quickly highlight some of the common themes that all of our speakers mentioned in their commentary. First being that Nepal needs investment in domestic infrastructure and capacity building. Second being the need for private sector role involvement in connectivity. Third is the failure of economic diplomacy, despite there being various meetings at various levels. Fourth is how security sensitivities of our neighbors play a role in the success of our connectivity endeavors. So these are some common themes that I have noticed across all of our speakers' commentaries. Now, there are a few questions, however, we're short for time. So 2 or 3 questions I'd like to ask the speakers. And this is for any of the speakers that are willing to answer this question. You all spoke about the need for investment in domestic infrastructure and capacity building in Nepal so that Nepal can become a transit state. However, is it possible for Nepal to get direct benefits of connectivity with its neighbors, not just be a transit state between them?
Can I?
Please, sir.
Can I? Thank you, Subhangi. Of course, I have raised this issue particularly for Nepal being a transit country between India and China. But we see that, sorry, just I'll start the video. Yeah, of course, what I see that the perspective of transit services now, the definition of transit now, it is being changed in the new context. The transit in traditional terms, what we understand that transit is the right of the landlocked country, and the coastal country are bound to provide the transit services, the facilities of transit, freedom of transit to the landlocked country. But now the definition is gradually changing in the sense that countries are, you see, integrating. They are going on economic integration at the regional and the bilateral, sub-regional and the bilateral level. So in order to connect their economy and enhance people-to-people connectivity, now they are advocating for this seamless transport connectivity, seamless transportation. So what we see that when we talk about seamless transportation, and although it may not happen tomorrow or in near future, but in far future, it can happen when the relationship between the bilateral diplomatic relationship and the bilateral relations, the relation between China and India will build up. In that context, Nepal could provide the, you see, the just Lakshmanji has also spoken about the time for movement of cargo, overland cargo. When the cargo is moved through sea lane, ocean transportation, it takes quite a long time. And moving through the land transportation system by rail and road, even we have been experiencing that there is drastic reduction in the number of days of delivery of the goods when you import and when you export. So I think, so there are benefits associated with it. So we have to focus on, you see, developing seamless transportation among the countries so that it will help, you see, to enhance our economy. And we are talking about the corridors, north-south corridor. It might be transport corridors later, and when we go on building up and building economic infrastructures, industries, special economic zones, and all these things, it will help to, you see, transform these transport corridors as economic corridor. And the largely Nepalese peoples will be benefited by getting employment and other income opportunities, and economic activities will go on. So that's why it is very important for us to develop transport infrastructure that links north border with the southern border. So right at the moment, it will help to decrease the cost of delivery for Nepalese goods for export and import. And in the long run, it has the prospect of, you see, linking Nepal as the transit between the transit, providing transit services between India and China. So that there are prospects. That's why I am talking about investment in the capacity building and the investment in the infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Another question is from Ajay Khanal, sir. He asks, in order to benefit from connectivity with China, what should be our top priorities in the near future? What needs to be done to actually benefit through connectivity with China?
So shall I speak on this?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, of course, I have already spoken about this. The primary needs for us is to develop infrastructure. That is very much important in order to benefit from the transit services with China. That is very much important. Second, we have to develop, you see, appropriate modalities for movement of the goods through the territory of China. Particularly, you see, when you talk about the transit services through China, there are two aspects. One is they have provided one border post that links with the Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and it is near to that. It is on the northwestern frontier of China, and there are other four seaports on the eastern part of China, eastern coast of. So there are possibilities of connecting to the Central Asian Republic, Central Asian countries, which are rich in mineral resources and fossil fuel. That is there, and of course, for that to happen, we have to develop appropriate modality for movement of the transited goods. What sort of modalities we are supposed to follow. If the modality is if the procedure is simplified, then of course the people will be enticed to use those corridors. And if the procedure is, if you see the transit transfer protocol to the transit transport agreement, in one of the clauses, what I have seen that everything, the modalities of the movement of the cargo through the territory of China will decided by the customs authority. So I think it is very much uncertain. If the customs authorities, you see, he can assign very tough process, or it is up to him. So I think we don't leave all these ends open. So that there will be uncertainties, so that we have to have certain defined parameters, defined procedures with regard to the customs procedure, with regard to the provision of the banking services, insurance services, liability of the carriers. All these things has to be tied up in the, has to be made up in the protocol. If not in the protocol, there should be some standard operating procedure that has to be agreed by the two governments. Then only we can, you see, streamline the transit services. And what I see that if we could develop, you see, very good transport connectivity, it is not only the transit services, it will also help to, you see, improve our trade with, decrease the cost of transaction with China. But here we have to focus on export, the development of the Nepalese export in China, because I have already spoken that the last year it was worst disimbalance in our trade with China, the lowest in export and the highest in import. So that needs to be corrected.
Thank you, sir. Now we're moving on to our last two questions. Vijay sir has asked, why has China yet not agreed to sign trade agreement to allow our goods to China without tariff as with India? This is again open to the floor.
Again, shall I speak or some other people? Rasmanji or
सरले भनेपछि
maybe,
म भन्छु
yeah. Actually, there is provisions in the bilateral trade treaty we have. It is under the WTO arrangement. You see, the developing or the least developed or the developed countries were encouraged to provide duty-free access to the least developed countries' product up to the 97% of the harmonized code, customs code classification, SS classification. On that pretext, government of China has also announced duty-free access for so many least developed countries. Out of them, Nepal is also one of them. And I, in the capacity of Commerce Secretary back in 2010, we have signed the duty-free tariff preferences for Nepalese goods. That were 4,800 products during that time. Later on, what I see that after my retirement, some other products were added on that list, and the list become the item of 8,000 products. But if you see the export of this product, it is almost nil, in the sense that there are certain provisions that China has laid on its agreement, is the rules of origin criteria, very difficult, very tough rules of origin criteria. That is one thing. And second, there are the non-tariff barrier, like the sanitary and phytosanitary measures and technical barriers to trade measures. This has hindered the export of the Nepalese goods to China. Third, Nepal's competitive capacity is very much low, and we don't have the sufficient productions or the efficient production that can be product efficiently produced product articles that can be exported to China. So these are some of the areas. Due to that, we have not been able to harness the benefits that has been assigned in the treaty, in the bilateral treaty signed back in 2010, and I think after that 2014 or something like that. So for that, what I have suggested, that even when I met the Chinese ambassador in Kathmandu sometimes back, not now, I have advised not this ambassador, the previous ambassadors, they need to look at least there should be review why Nepal was not able to utilize that zero tariff preferences provided China. What is the reason behind it? What are the bottlenecks? What are the hurdles? It should be reviewed at the government level and even private sector level, and they should come up with some recommendations, and it has to be sorted out. If not, the agreement only remains in paper. So that's why the disimbalance of the trade is very much high in China. And if you talk about the differences between the export and import, and it is so high that export is negligible, and we are having import increased every year. But on the other side, on the Indian side, what we see that almost our 75% of our export goes to India, and we get almost 64% of import from there. So I think there are several reasons. One is the open border, and you see those Indian investment in Nepal, which are the major exporters from Nepal. So I think so what we have been built, it is a kind of gravitational pull as well, since we have the open border, and we have all the rivers flowing down to India, and we have these cultural similarities, we have religious similarity, language barrier is not there. So there are several factors for that. But with Chinese, there are several other barriers, like Lakshmanji has pointed out about the language barrier. It is also great problem in order to deal with the Chinese authorities, with the Chinese people. So I think that's why the trade has not been built up with China, and there is need of soul sourcing on both sides of the border. Then only we can find out some regions, some solution to that.
अलिकति सरको कुरामा म थोरै मात्रै थप्छु कि हेलो
हजुर
थोरै मात्रै मलाई के थप्न मन लाग्यो भने नि अहिलेको क्वेशन जुन शुभाङ्गीजीले गर्नुभयो त्यसमा चाहिँ यो इन्डिया र चाइना बीचको ट्रेडको सन्दर्भको कुरा गर्दा त्यहाँ चाहिँ हामीले भोलि नेपाललाई दुई पक्ष बीचमा चाहिँ भोलि हिजो इन्डियामा चाइनिज गुड सबै ब्यान्ड थियो, अहिले ओपन भइसक्यो सबै कुराहरू। त्यो हामी त्यो एजबाट अहिले बेग्लै एजमा आइसकेपछि अर्कै स्टेप अगाडि बढिसकेपछि चाइना र इन्डियाको बीचको ट्रेड चाहिँ भोलि गर्ने किसिमको उनीहरूको चाहिँ कुरा आयो भने हाम्रो नेपाल थ्रुबाट गर्दा हामीलाई बेनिफिट हुन्छ कि हुँदैन भन्ने विषयमा पनि एउटा हामीले चाहिँ स्टडी गर्नुपर्ने जस्तो मलाई लाग्छ। किन लाग्छ भने मैले अब यो भन्न मिल्छ कि मिल्दैन थाहा छैन, जतिखेर हामीहरू यो लास्ट प्रोटोकलको मिटिङमा बसेका थियौँ उत्तरीतिरबाट यो कुराहरू आएको थियो, अलिकति हिन्ट चाहिँ हामीले भोलि इन्डियाको बोर्डरसम्म हाम्रो चाहिँ ट्रेडको मुभमेन्टलाई तिमीहरूको चाहिँ एग्री हुन्छ कि हुँदैन भन्ने खालको क्वेसनहरू आयो क्या। त्यो मैले किन जोड्न चाहेँ भने अघिको क्वेसन र हिजोको प्र्याक्टिकल एस्पेक्टमा रेज भएको क्वेसनहरू र इच्छा भनौँ न नर्थतिरको इच्छाहरू चाहिँ वीरगञ्ज अथवा काकरबिट्टा यो मुभमेन्टसम्म जानलाई चाहिँ हामीलाई हुन्छ कि हुँदैन भन्ने कुराहरू पनि आएको थियो। त्यसले गर्दा अझै पनि म के भन्छु भने हाम्रो लागि त्यो हितकर छ कि छैन, हामीले त्यो हितकर छ भने साउथतिरको कुराकानी गर्दाखेरि बा यो कुरो एउटा उसमा आउन सक्छ कि भन्ने कुरा पनि हामीले एउटा स्टडी चाहिँ गरिराख्दा हुन्छ कि जस्तो लाग्छ। अथवा भोलि भनौँ न साउथबाट पनि नर्थ बोर्डरमै जाने कुराहरू पनि आउला होइन, किनभने अब त ग्लोबल ओल्ड हुन लागिसक्यो। त्यस्तै नेपाल हब अथवा अफसोर ट्रेडको चाहिँ एउटा प्लेस बनाउन मिल्छ कि मिल्दैन, हाम्रो रोडको क्यापेसिटीहरू चाहिँ एक्सपान्सन गर्दा त्यो हुन सक्छ कि सक्दैन, यी कुराहरू हामीले अलिकति स्टडी गर्नुपर्छ जस्तो लाग्छ। अब जे भए पनि अन्तिममा चाहिँ कस्तो छ भने अब रेलकै कुरा गर्दा, रोडकै कुरा गर्दा, यो हाम्रो चाहिँ डिस्टेन्सकै कुरा गर्दा, सरले अहिले भने जस्तो हाम्रो चाहिँ साउथतिरको चाहिँ जति पनि ल्याङ्ग्वेजदेखि लिएर विभिन्न कुराहरूले हामीलाई जुन किसिमको चाहिँ एउटा ट्रेडलाई इज बनाएको छ, यी सबै कुराहरू हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ हाम्रो बिजनेसम्यानहरूले होइन के खोजिरहेछ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ उयो भन्छ नि पिक अप लो ह्याङ्गिङ फ्रुट्स भन्छ नि। अहिले लो ह्याङ्गिङको फ्रुट्स साउथतिर छ र हाम्रो घरको फेस पनि साउथतिरै फर्केको घरको साउथतिरै हाम्रो मुभमेन्ट बढी हुने अवस्था छ। त्यसले गर्दाखेरि सरकारले यो बारेमा चाहिँ कसरी बढाउने हो भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ अलिकति यी हामीले जति पनि कुराहरू गऱ्यौँ, सेक्युरिटीको कुरा, प्राइभेट सेक्टरको इन्टरेक्सनका कुरा लिएर, त्यस्तै के अरे इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चरका यी सबै कुराहरू राखेर चाहिँ अलिकति एउटा गहन अध्ययन गरेर अनि बाँकी कुराहरू चाहिँ हामीले प्रोटोकलमा समावेश गर्न सकिन्छ कि जस्तो मलाई चाहिँ लाग्छ। धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Divijana sir, like the valuable insight about the question. Now, our last question of today's webinar, Arpan ji has asked, we are talking about connectivity in policy level and we have signed treaties. However, if we see ground realities now, only 20 containers are allowed from northern borders. And today they have informed they would increase it up to 40 containers per day. Thousands of containers along with immediately needed fertilizers are blocked. In this ground reality,
40 container ki भन्नु हो 20 feet ki 40 feet ki भन्नु हो
20 containers per day, 20 containers per day,
okay,
about 40 containers per day, increasing. And in this ground reality, how should we understand the Chinese interest regarding border relations, and how can the Nepalese side be assured for long-term eased border movements?
To whom the question is directed? It is directed to whom?
It is directed to whoever is willing to answer. So,
yeah, of course. What I see that the rationing of the containers in the border, it does not make sense, in the sense that one of the point that Shraddha has highlighted, I just want to reiterate it, that China does not regard trade with Nepal as significant. They have such a big traders. They are the largest exporter among all countries, and they are second largest importer after the United States of America. So the volume of trade in comparison to other countries to Nepal is very, very less, minimal for them. But what I see that being a close neighbors and you see having common borders, I am wondering, I am surprised, you see, why China is rationing the movement of the container into Nepal. Although I know that the corona, they are talking about coronavirus, which of course have originated in Wuhan, China, but their trade is not affected. They have the United States of America is their largest trading partner. They and European Union, ASEAN, they are the largest trading partners for them. But there is no restriction in their trade with those countries. But why they are putting such restriction with Nepal? So I think the moot question is there. Why? That means they are not giving any importance or any significance to their trade with Nepal. So I think this is very serious thing, and the government of Nepal should talk with the government of China. There are provisions, you see, the protocols could be maintained, the safety protocols, health protocols could be maintained, and the containers could be, and the goods could be moved across the border. So I don't see any very such rational and logic behind the stoppage of the rationing of the movement of the container. So it should be it should be taken seriously by the government of Nepal with government of China, because we have heard that many perishable items like the fruits, vegetable, we got a lot of this apple and and this onions and all these things, agricultural goods, agricultural product from China, and when they are, you see, in the borders from months and it is all perished, it is all destroyed, it is all rotten. And even the goods that are supposed to come to Nepal via for the Dasai and Tihar festival, it has not yet been able to arrive. And so many containers, they have been diverted to the ocean route. So I think it is a serious matter. It is increasing cost on us, and it is impeding our trade. So I think government has to talk. They have to take it in a seriously, in a very high level, and this sort of thing should not happen. There are several you see methods that it can be resolved, and there is no any there is no any other such disturbances should be created for movement of the bilateral trade. Thank you.
अलिकति म थप्छु ल यसमा, सरको एकदमै कुरा आयो, राम्रो कुरा आयो। यसमा मैले थप्नु पर्ने चाहिँ, मैले अघि पनि अलिकति जिज्ञासा राखेको थिएँ, 20 फिटर और 40 फिटर भनेर भनेको थिएँ। हामीले चाहिँ यहाँ लमसममा क्वान्टिटीको कुराहरू मात्रै आयो। मैले के त्यसमा जोड्न चाहेँ भने 20 फिटर र 40 फिटर दुईटा चाहिँ कन्टेनरको छ मुभमेन्ट हामी कहाँ नेपालमा, भनौँ न साउथतिरबाट आउँदाखेरि। अब नर्थतिरबाट कस्ट यदि घटाउने हो भने 20 फिटर भन्दा 40 फिटरको चाहिँ अलिकति बढी के अरे कम कस्ट लाग्छ, त्यो स्वाभाविकै हो। अब उत्तरतिरको हेर्ने हो भने सिगासे भनौँ अथवा तातो पानीको पारिपट्टिसम्म भनौँ, उतातिर प्रब्लम छैन 40 फिटर ल्याउनलाई। तर हामी कहाँ दुईटा कारणहरूले चाहिँ त्यो कन्टेनरहरू आउन सक्ने अवस्था छैन। त्यो दुईटा कारण भनेको अघिकै कुरा म फेरि रिपिट गर्छु। एउटा कारण नेपाल पट्टिको रोडको कनेक्टिभिटी पोर एउटा भयो। दोस्रो कुरो चाहिँ हाम्रो ड्राइपोर्टहरूको क्यापासिटीहरू पनि पर्छ त्यसमा। जस्तो तातो पानीमा खासै समस्या छैन त्यो 40 फिटरको लागि पनि, तैपनि समस्या चाहिँ छ। रसुवाको कुरा गर्ने हो भने अलिकति हामीलाई 40 फिटरको ल्याएर त्यहाँ राख्ने अथवा ल्याउने ठुलो ट्रकहरूको अलिकति अप्ठ्यारो अवस्था छ। त्यसले गर्दाखेरि कन्टेनरको त्यो अवस्था एउटा मैले यहाँ अलिकति राखेँ। अनि दोस्रो कुरो चाहिँ मोमेन्ट 40 र 20 को कुराहरूमा अहिले हाम्रो एक्सपिरियन्स जुन छ, मैले अघि पनि भने कि जस्तो लाग्छ, त्यो छुटाएँ कि हामी कहाँ कस्तो पनि एक्सपिरियन्स छ भने चाइनापट्टिबाट पर डे 4 वटा ट्रक भन्दाखेरि बढी छिर्न दिँदैन, 4 वटा ट्रक भयो आजलाई पो भनेर रोकिदिन्छ। त्यो खालको अवस्था पनि व्यावहारिक रूपमा छ। भनेपछि यी सबै हडल्सहरूको समग्र रूप भनेको चाहिँ के त, कहाँ गएर ठोकिन्छ? प्राइभेट सेक्टरमा ठोकिन्छ। किन ठोकिन्छ? त्यही टाइम र कस्टको कुराले ठोकिन्छ। त्यसले गर्दाखेरि यी विषयहरू पनि अलिकति हाम्रो यो के अरे प्रेजेन्टेसनमा अथवा भोलि रिपोर्टमा चाहिँ यी कुरालाई नै अलिकति हामीले हेरेर गर्दाखेरि हुन्छ कि जस्तो मलाई लाग्छ। धन्यवाद। मैले त सकेँ अहिलेलाई।
शुभाङ्गीको आवाज आएन।
Hello, Abayo. So thank you so much once again to all our speakers and our presenter for today. I remain most grateful for all of the audience and then their unwavering attention throughout the webinar. I'm confident that we've all learned something from it. Thank you again. We're looking forward to having such discussions in the future.
Hey,
Thank you, Purushottam sir.
Subhangi.
Hazur sir.
Namrata ji ke भन्नुहुन्छ कि?
Ma'am, would you like to say something before we?
Not really, but okay, as Vijay ji has mentioned, मलाई चाहिँ के लाग्छ भन्दाखेरि यो अरु टेक्निकल कुरामा भन्दा पनि I think when a contract is made between two countries, we have to now reach a stage where we we hold the people who make the contract accountable and the countries accountable. जस्तो अघि अजयजीको प्रश्न जुन थियो नि, how to make them accountable. हामीसँग contract accountable बनाउने भने कन्ट्र्याक्टै हो हैन. So we have to look into the clauses inside the contract. Even this issue of the number of trucks coming into Nepal from China. So if we are asking the question, why only so many numbers भनेर, त्यो कन्ट्र्याक्टमा त होला नि, why is China getting the leeway to do as they want? उनीहरूलाई 4 वटा पठाइदिन्छु आज भने पठाइदियो, बन्द गरिदियो, सिद्धियो हैन. या अहिले यहाँ गरिरहेछ, यहाँबाट नगर्ने, यहाँबाट गर्छु. या पेन्डेमिक त भइरहेछ, ल पेन्डेमिककै कारणले we are going to stop basic necessities to go into Nepal. That is not how it is done, and especially not with countries like India and China हैन. मेरो इश्यू चाहिँ के हो भन्दाखेरि त्यो अघि जुन अजयजीले भन्नको क्वेसन छ नि, त्यसमा अलि डिपर अनप्याक गर्न जाँदाखेरि why is this happening? What is the weakness within our system, or what is the weakness in the contract? Is it in the agreement and contract that the leeway is given more to countries like China to do what they want to do? अहिले हामी नर्थको कुरा गरे भएर मैले चाइना भनिरा. So त्यो चाहिँ हामीलाई हेर्न जरुरी छ जस्तो लाग्छ. र as soon as that is breached, then there has to be some way of addressing it so that countries like Nepal don't always get पिल्सी नपरोस् के नेपाललाई जहिले पनि. त्यो चाहिँ नि हामीले हेर्न पर्छ जस्तो मलाई लाग्छ, to make it accountable and to make sure that it doesn't happen. जुन हाम्रो अग्रिमेन्टमा छ, अग्रिमेन्टमा जानुभन्दा अगाडि we have to make sure that we put things that are conducive for Nepal. Bigger countries लाई त भइ नै हाल्छ. अनि त्यो हामीलाई हुनुपर्ने कुरा ब्रिच भयो भने त्यसलाई कसरी हामीले अकाउन्टेबल बनाउने भन्ने चाहिँ नि एउटा सिस्टम एस्टाब्लिश गर्न जरुरी छ जस्तो लाग्छ.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you to all the speakers once again, and special thanks to the South Asian Small Grants Program and the Asia Foundation for making today's webinar possible. Looking forward to having such discussions with you all soon. I'll be ending the webinar for today here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Us.
you.